Hello, everyone. My name is Urshel Metcalf, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to be able to chat with you just a little bit today and discuss a topic that we are all aware of and we've been dealing with for, um, always been dealing with. But I think in the last 10 years, it's become a conversation that our nation is having in a way that we can do something and make a difference. Again, my name is Urshel Metcalf, and I'm coming to you social distancing from Plano, Texas, just outside of Dallas, just north of Dallas. Um, Gunnery Sergeant in the Marine Corps from 1988 until 2001, and veteran of Desert Shield and Desert Storm. After my time in the Marine Corps, I spent about 10 years in Jacksonville, North Carolina, outside of Camp Lejeune there, as a pastor doing some missionary work, always working with people. And since 2009, I've been back at home here in Dallas, and I've been working in finance and business, mostly doing business consulting. But for a time, I worked for an organization called Honor, Courage, Commitment. And that organization started another organization called 22 Kill, which some of you may have heard of. Started out as an initiative and now is a full-fledged operating organization like many others that are focusing on the conversation around suicide, veteran and military suicide. And so in that time and in my experience, there's lots of things that I've looked at that I want to share today to discuss how this conversation has progressed, but more importantly, the things that we can do, the mental hygiene that we can do as warriors, as people who, let's face it, we're bred for the fight, but this is a fight that's different. Suicide is never the problem. Suicide is a result, right? Suicide happens because of problems, and mostly unresolved problems that compile. And 2012, 2014, the Veterans Administration did a big study. And as a result of that, that's where this conversation really took a national platform. And the conversation of 22 veterans a day committing suicide. One of the things in that study that wasn't talked about is the demographics and the age. And a large majority of those veterans were above the age of 55. And as we analyzed that and looked at that, and we looked at what era of veterans had really been impacted the most by suicide, and those that served in Vietnam versus those from my era versus the Iraq, Afghanistan veterans. There were some significant factors there, but the result is still the same. And the challenge that we all face, the thing that we all have to figure out is whether it's our brothers and sisters in arms, whether it's our family members that are being impacted, if we only look at the result, which is suicide, then we're never going to really deal with the problem. I'm very proud of the military, the Marine Corps that exists today, because so much of the stigma of depression, treatment, counseling, all of those things that during my time, initially in the Marine Corps and prior to that, if you had to get counseling, if you needed therapy, those things we felt could impact your career, your ability to be promoted, your deployability, which would again affect those things. I believe that the Marine Corps and the military has done a much better job of not only addressing that and helping to minimize, not eliminate, but minimize that stigma, but really provide tools, provide services on the base, even a part of debriefing and preparation, making sure that we understand that there are things that you can do. There are things that you can do for hygiene, mentally and emotionally, to make sure that these things don't overwhelm you. I was speaking about this on an interview, and one of the things that I shared is that, when I was in Saudi Arabia and we were in full mop gear, and Scud missiles were flying over our head, and Patriot batteries were firing up, and all the things that are going on, all the things that we all experience as a part of our training and as a part of the reality of us doing our job. No matter how bad those things got, no matter how bad the suck was, I don't know anybody that ever thought, you know what, this is so bad, I'm going to take my own life. I don't know of Marines who have been in combat and in the midst of a firefight or even being wounded have said, you know what, it's not worth it. I'm going to kill myself. And I believe one of the reasons why is it doesn't matter whether the Marine Corps made you a diesel mechanic. I worked in communications, electronics, infantrymen. It doesn't matter. You get those dress blues. You don that Eagle, Globe, and Anchor. And beyond your MOS, you have this purpose and this value of being a Marine. And in addition to that, you've got the man and woman to your right and your left that's depending on you, that is working with you, the brothers and sisters in arms. We've got to do our job. We've got to pull together. Mission accomplishment. One of the things that I've seen is that when people leave the Marine Corps, say for example, you were a diesel mechanic in the Marine Corps, you get out and you become a diesel mechanic. I've seen people lose a sense of identity and a sense of purpose. And I think this is one of the key factors. And I hope that you can take this and evaluate this for yourself, even now while you're serving, to make sure that your purpose and that your identity is something that you understand, that you value, and you keep your focus on that. Because when individuals get out, and we've seen this over and over again, as I was working with people who wanted to start their own business, they were really trying to connect with something that made them feel valuable. They were trying to replace two things. They were trying to replace the sense of purpose and value that they felt while on active duty. And they were also trying to replace that relationship, that esprit de corps, that brotherhood, that it's just natural. Basically from the yellow footprints on, I have my brothers that I started with 30 years ago, and we message weekly to this day. And you don't necessarily find that when you just get out and go get a job. And so we started seeing and really understanding that people were missing that connection. They were missing that ability to serve and connect and feel the level of purpose. But it doesn't just happen when you get off active duty. Sometimes it happens as a result of a failure or a challenge or not getting promoted. I saw one of the greatest Marines that I knew, that I served with, get passed over for promotion when he had always been promoted well and on time or early. And he got shingles, all types of things. He just fell apart. And it's because he wasn't really prepared to deal with that in a way. And then he let it pile up, and it became rejection, and it became resentment, and all of these other things built up. So the thing that I would say to every single one of you that are serving, and to you in regards to your brothers and sisters and those that you lock arms with and that you're serving with, as we pay attention, you have to recognize that when you get into this battle, just like every other battle, it's not one that you ever want to try to fight alone. It's not one that you want to ignore, and it's not one that you want to put off and say, I'll deal with this later. When you begin to feel and recognize some of those things, when you begin to close off, shut down, or you begin to see that, start having the conversations, start getting the connections, start communicating, start writing, start, whatever it is, whatever outlets you need to be able to get those things out so that they don't build up. Because once it builds up, you can just imagine, if your brain, if your body is just being filled with trash, if you're compounding these things over and over again, there's actually chemicals that are being released that are overwhelming your brain and the way that your brain functions. And then you will lose the ability to make the reasonable and rational decisions. We always have to remember that this is not about someone being weak. This is not about someone being a loser. This is about the natural reaction that we all have to certain circumstances in our life and things happening. So you have to start the conversations. You have to deal with it. You have to de-stress. You have to offload these things. And you have to be very realistic about the fact that none of us are immune to anxiety, depression. And any of us, if we get into a cycle, can get caught in a way that this drives us to a point where we begin to feel that hopelessness. We begin to feel that lack of purpose. And then crazy thoughts start to come into our head. And we start to think that other people would be better without us. We start to think that, nothing matters. We start moving in a cycle and moving in that direction and deteriorating. But again, there's so many things that you can do. All of those resources are being made available to you. The thing that I want to say to each and every one of you who stood on those yellow footprints and decided to serve, I want you to know that your service to this nation, our service doesn't end when you take off your uniform. Your value doesn't diminish when you no longer are showing up to formation in the morning. Our country, our great country, needs you as much when you leave active duty as they do when you're standing on that wall, when you're going on those deployments. Our country needs great men and women to serve in Washington, to start businesses. I love working with veteran businesses because there are some things that I know that are always going to be in place, and some ways that we can communicate and the ways that we can team up and work together. Our nation needs that more than anything else. So always connect with your purpose. Always connect with your identity. Never neglect who you are and what you need. And obviously, most importantly, don't be afraid to ask for help. I'll say this to you. If you knew someone was in trouble, if you knew they were facing challenges, would you help them? Would you talk to them? Would you pull them aside? Would you make a phone call if necessary? Well, what I want to encourage you to do is just to remember, if you ever get into that place, there's a whole bunch of people around you who will be that person for you, who will make that phone call, who will listen. There's all types of resources that you have available. Do not fight this fight alone. We know that we're not made to fight alone. We win together, and we win because we care about one another. Semper Fidelis, and thank you for allowing me to share a little bit about this and our experiences. If there's ever anything that we can do, again, my name is Urshel Metcalf. We're always here to support and help you find that next mission and that next purpose in life. Have a great day.